Go. Okay.
Okay.
Or you can ask questions.
Do you want
No.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have any kids?
Yeah, I have 2 children.
Okay.
How long has your family been in Moweaqua?
Since 1893, or before, a little bit before.
Oh my gosh.
Do you enjoy life in Moweaqua?
Sure do.
What were some of the old businesses in Moweaqua?
How far back?
Just pretty much like however long you've lived here.
Yeah. Before us.
Yeah.
Before you. Well, my folks bought this house in 1940. And we used to live down, you know where Hall Jewelers is? Just west of there was a little red brick house. That's where I was born and raised. And then we bought this house in 1940 and we moved down here. And then after I got through high school and graduated, I got married and moved to Decatur because my wife and I both worked up there. She worked days and I worked nights. So that meant 2 cars, so we moved to Decatur. And we lived up there.
You was in service first.
Pardon?
You was in service first.
Yeah, I was in the service twice, in 1946 and then again in 1950 during Korea. And then I worked at the post office here in town in 1953 and 54. And we got married, then I moved to Decatur. We lived up there about 30 years and then moved back here in 1997. And we used to run, my family used to run the mill, which there's over here. And we ran the theater, and where that hollow spot is right across the street from the post office where they tore the building down, that was the old theater that we used to run. And then my uncle had a photo shop right about where the post office is sitting now. But my grandfather started, he ran what they call the flouring mill, which is where, about where the firehouse is now. Remember the old water tower? The big tall one, the old brick one? Okay, it was right west of that, and it was up sort of on the hill. And he ran that, and then my dad and 2 bachelor brothers worked with him in the mill. And then they also ran a mill in Pana that was called the Munson-Meyer Mill. They ran that too. And I worked in the mill and in theater and all through me. Well, from the time I was old enough to know what I was doing, I took tickets at the show and everything else, was a janitor, a little bit of everything.
What was the movie theater like?
What was it like? Well, it wasn't too big. I mean, we ran 2 shows a week, and usually 2 shows on Saturday night, and they ran Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and then they'd change, and they'd run Sunday, Monday, Tuesday at different movies. And I don't know, it seated almost about maybe 200 people at the most.
Huh. Had you ever been there to watch movies a lot?
I worked there from the time I was in about the 8th grade all the way through high school.
Oh my.
Was it like a popular place for most people to be?
That was the only thing to do then. That was before television.
What was the old mill like here in Moweaqua?
Well, my grandfather would buy wheat and grind it and make flour. And then he would also, he ground enough flour that he would ship flour to Decatur. Now this was back in the 1890s and early 1900s. And then they converted it to a grocery store about 1933, 34, along in there. And then we had just a regular grocery store there. And also the ice house. Then later we had a little place where they'd bring ice down from Decatur, and they had a little, what they called an ice house. And they would deliver ice down, and then people would stop by there and get ice in the evenings or whenever they needed it.
I've seen big smokestacks at the ice house on an indicator. There's a big tunnel, or a big tube indicator that says that. Well, we already got that. Good at living. What did you do for a living before you retired?
Before what?
You retired.
I was a printer at the Herald Review for 37.5 years.
Did you have any family members work or have been to the mine?
I had a uncle by marriage that was killed and a cousin by marriage that was killed in the mine. It was Andy Corby and Charlie Campbell. And Charlie Campbell and my aunt were married just 3 or 4 days before the disaster.
Wow. How were, business-wise, how was Moweaqua after the mine disaster?
It survived, let's put it that way. It wasn't flourishing, but you know, I mean, it affected practically every family in town.
Do you think that Moweaqua would have been equally successful if the coal mine was non-existent?
No, that was the only business really outside of the elevators. It really hurt the town at that time, and then it took quite a while then for, you know, so all the kids was in school. I had, I think, 3 or 4 kids that was in my class at the first grade that lost their dads in the mine.
Did the disaster, from your point of view, bring Moweaqua as a community together?
Well, it helped. It solved a lot of stuff. You know, they had, the miners more or less lived in the south part of town. They always called them the South Enders, and there wasn't a real friction, you know, but I mean, it just, they were all foreign. Some of them still spoke foreign language, Slavish and Hungarian, Polish. But a lot of them, they were all not intermarried, but I mean related. They like the Potiks and the Pekoviches and the Turpaks were related, and the Vogas and the Sapinis were related. The Ondases and the Sapinis were related, which all lost. Well, the Vogas didn't lose anybody in the mine, but he did work in the mine, but he was one of the ones that didn't go to work that day.
What types of things were produced at the mill here in Moweaqua?
Flour, cornmeal, and like feed for hogs. Used to be Shorts and Bran, they called it, because it was a byproduct from the wheat. And, but that, about the time I remember, they were converting it to the grocery store then. But they sold everything. They sold stock remedies and stuff for livestock, and salt. I'm trying to think what else. That was about it. There used to be a pond by the old mill. I don't know where you've seen pictures of it, probably, of the old mill. And when they built the new firehouse, they were excavating the ground and getting down for the foundation and stuff, and they found the old boiler buried in the dirt underneath before they had filled in the pond.
So, when you were selling, whenever the mill was making all these things, how well was the business? How much, like, did they make a lot of money?
Back then, I mean, they made a living. My dad and 2 brothers, bachelor brothers, lived on it, plus the family.
After the disaster, was business better or worse for the mill?
It never changed too much because, you know, people still had to eat, and by then they were converting a little bit to a grocery store then.
How long was the mill actually in use? How long did they use it before it was completely shut down?
Well, it was built in 1850 before the railroad went through. We know that because of the location, because if the railroad had been through, the mill would have been built farther to the west, but it wasn't. It was built over there, and then the railroad went through, and then, I don't know, the early 20s, within 51 was laid as a cement road. It used to be dirt, and I don't know, it just, it did, it wasn't what you call a flourishing business, but it did a good business, a local business.
Was the mill always owned by your family?
No, my grandfather took it over it was built in 1850, my grandfather took it over in 1893, and they closed it in 1954, I think. But they didn't grind feed and stuff after, 1932 or 33.
Okay. How long was the movie theater in Moweaqua in use?
I think they closed the theater in 54 or 55, and my dad started it back before there were talkie movies. It was silent movies and had one projector, and one of my bachelor uncles sat down in front, sort of in a pit or something. They had a piano, and he would play the music for or if there was a chase, he'd play fast music, or if it was something, he'd play something smooth. He was quite a pianist, and he played by ear all the time anyway, he had one of the first talkie movies in this area, about the same time that they had it in Decatur. Then they went to 2 projectors, and like they do now.
Huh.
The first talkies, the film was separate. You'd get a case of film, like your 35mm film that you kids use at school and everything. Then the sound part came on great big discs like this, and they were about this thick. And you had a turntable and a pickup by each machine. You had to get everything synchronized, because if you didn't, the guy's mouth would be moving, and maybe he talked a half a minute later. And then later, when they finally put the sound on the edge of the film, and they used what they call an exciter lamp through an amplifier then, more or less like computers work now, and they picked that right off the side, so you didn't have to worry about it.
That's really neat. If it were still up today, where would it be located in Moweaqua?
The theater,
Yeah.
it's in that, you know where the chiropractor is?
Yeah.
Up here, and right across from the post office, where that vacant spot is between those 2 buildings, that was the theater. It was in there.
Did they just tear it down because it was old?
It got old and the roof was leaking, and it,
Well, I saw it gone one day and didn't know what was going on. What about the mill? Where would it be?
about where the firehouse sits. The north side of the firehouse would probably have been about the front of the mill.
The new one or the old one?
The new firehouse now.
Oh, okay.
The Fodars Market was in there after they tore the mill down, and then the mall, you remember the mall?
Yeah.
Okay, it was right in that area where it's at.
What was your favorite place to go in town?
The loaf,
Yeah.
you mean, or after school or whatever?
Yeah.
Well, either the food room or the cafe on the corner there where Lauer's Insurance is. Used to be a restaurant there.
I don't know that either.
That's where we always went after the basketball games and everything, and everybody would head for. It was either there what they called a Charnita Cafe or a Blues Cafe, or then there was a Colburn's Cafe on Main Street, about across from. Trying to think what's in there now. Lynn's used to have a refrigerator place there.
Oh, okay.
By the barber shop.
Yeah.
There was a barber shop, was Cheatham's store back then, and then there was Thomas's store, and then that was the next store was the restaurant, was Colburn's. It was later Wendell's. And then they moved from there, then they went down to where the pub shop is now. They built that.
Were you there the day of the disaster, the mine disaster, to watch and wait for them to find the miners? If so, what was it like?
Well, I was 5 years old at the time, and we lived in a little house there just west of where Hall Jewelers is, which is just about 2 blocks. And I can remember the morning that it happened, and really didn't go down there that day. My dad and I did go down to our neighbors, which lived down the street west, on West South Street, that their father was in mining, was one of the miners. And we went down to their house and took them some fruit and some stuff, you know, just to show our respect. And then later on, then my dad took me down one night because the Illinois Central Railroad had brought in a bunch of, not a bunch, but 4 or 5 passenger cars and a dining car, so that the rescue workers could eat, had hot food there, and then a place for them to rest. I can remember that just as plain as day. And I can remember standing, excuse me, in the doorway and watching when they would find any miners, they would take them to the funeral home, which is uptown. And I can remember the old, well, they weren't ambulances, they were funeral cars, that's what they called them, it was a hearse.
Yeah.
But there were several towns that there was probably 5 or 6 different towns sent hearses to help, you know, to take them up. And then later, most of the Catholic miners, they had a service for them in the gym at high school. But I didn't go to it. I mean, I know of it, but I used to. I can remember standing there every 4 or 5 days, and pretty soon you'd see the first go by, and you knew that they'd found another one.
So would you say that you knew the majority of the men that were involved in the accident, or just worked
I went
at the
to
mine?
school with all their kids. Like I said, I had 3 or 4 in my class in the 1st grade that lost their dads, and then there were several others that were, you know, older kids. The Tierpak family was a big family. I think he had 16 or 17 kids.
Oh my goodness.
And
It's huge.
the Corbys, I don't know, Andy Corby, which was my cousin, and then there was a John Corby, his brother, and his dad. When they found the miners, that they were all right together, or 2 of them was at least, holding each other in their arms. They said that's the way they found them. And then later, the George Corby worked for us, and John Ondas, who lost his dad in the mine, worked for us at the mill and the show. And Chan Picovish worked with us. A lot of the boys worked at the mill with us, you know, bagging groceries or carrying them out, and just little odd jobs.
So what were some of, like, people, like, ethnic, like, what race were, like, how many different kinds of ethnicities of people would you say were there?
Well, there was Polish, and there was Slavish, and Hungarian. The Corbys were from Lithuania, I think, and the Burleys, I don't know, I think you've interviewed Joe Ben over here, hadn't you, somebody? Joe
Yeah.
Ben Hibbert?
Yeah.
Okay, his family was English, and he was related to the Burleys. The Hibberts and the Burleys were related. And Negris, Sapinis, Ondas were all related one way, a brother or sister, you know, together, and same way with the Tierpaks and Potsies. You know, and Tim Torres, Angelo,
Oh, yeah.
okay, granddad worked in the mine, but he didn't go to work that day. He went out to the country. They said he was going to buy a chicken or something for Christmas dinner. But then they were Italian, so it was just a little bit of everything. You know, Austria-Hungary and
All around the world. All around the world.
yeah, mostly Europe, and the English, of course, was in, well, it's in Europe too, northeast, northwestern England.
Did it like affect Christmas the next day?
Hmm?
Did the disaster affect Christmas the next day?
It was just a sad time. I mean, you know, because they didn't finally get them all out, I think, till the 27th or 28th, I think it was, when they found the last one. Like, it hit just almost every family in town. They had a cousin or nephew or brother, sister, dad.
Huh. I didn't know that either. I didn't think there was that many.
There was 54 of them.
Oh my. Huh. In town, were cars driven by everyone or just people of the higher class?
They wasn't that much higher class. I mean, not all, because that was back long whenever you could buy a Model T, and a lot of them had Model Ts or Model A's and driven, but there were quite a few cars in town, and there was a lot of people in the south part of town there raised hogs. They had cows, they had chickens. I raised chickens myself when we lived down there, and everybody always had chickens. Usually had chickens of some kind or something. But they would come uptown, pick up scraps and stuff from the stores or the restaurants, anything that's left, and then take it and then feed it to their hogs and stuff. They got by. I mean, you got to admire them. They worked and they worked hard.
What was the Photoshop like?
The Photoshop, it was just my uncle took pictures, and he did do some develop film for people, and he didn't go out and take weddings or anything like that, you know. I mean, he usually they'd come to his shop there, and they would take pictures there. It was combined with a golf shop. Johnny Ondis had what they call a pro shop. He made golf clubs and everything there. He and I used to travel together. We sold golf bags and golf clubs. We'd go all over this part of Illinois, down as far as Centralia, and went as far west as Quincy. But that was back in the 40s then.
Do you have any other stories from around that time?
Like what?
Just
Anything you
anything.
remember?
No, not much. I mean, the kids, we all played together on weekends, or the Minot boys and the Burley, and we'd go out to the creek and go hickory nutting, or go fishing. And wintertime, all the elevators, both elevators, there was a north elevator and a south, which there still is, but they were back for the horse and buggy days, and they didn't have the pits in the ground. You went up into the elevator and you dumped your coal. Well, whenever it snowed or icy, those roads up into the elevator and the one out of it. It was always nice and slick. It was a good place to play with sleds. We'd always see who could slide the farthest or everything else, you know. We used to ice skate on the ponds. There were 2 ponds down by behind where Minot's DMJ is now. There were 2 ponds in there, and there was a tile yard then south of the mine, and these ponds furnished water for the mine, but it was a good place to ice skate then in the wintertime. But outside that, we went hunting, played ball. That's about it.
Well, we have no more questions. We have no more questions.
No more questions? Okay.
That's it.
Alrighty.
Alright, Laura, do you want to hit the... Okay, I'll do that.
Okay. Oh, do you have any like memorabilia from that time?
Like what?
Just anything.
We got pictures, but I think Carol said she was gonna come down and
That's fine.
take care of, look at them. I have some old pictures, you wanna look at them? Just a minute. You wanna, I gotta get through there. Joe, hand me those, will you?
Oh,
That's all right, that's all right.
I gotta hit the
I got my cook done.
button on here so it stops recording.